Hello, good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention, please, as we start to get tonight underway. So good evening, and thank you for attending tonight's business meeting of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Brad Gottschall. I'm your Lower Paxton Township Manager. And in typical fashion, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the agenda before we begin, particularly for those watching on television. Beginning under old business, the board will consider action on application for payment number 1, authorizing payment to Pensy Supply Incorporated for the 2019 Lower Paxton Township paving project. Next, the board will take action on bids for sewer system improvements within mini basins BC 2A, BC 2B, BC 2C, and BC 5B. And for sanitary repairs within the SC2B. Then, moving into new business, the board will consider action on a consolidation of previously subdivided lots, a final land development plan for Colonial and Linglestown Road, and a final land development plan for Amber Fields Phase 7A. Finally, the board will act on improvement guarantees and the payment of township and authority bills. And at this point, the members of the board are seated and prepared to begin business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gottschall. We'll call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors to order. We'd like to ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led this evening by Mrs. Lindsay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll now move to approval of minutes, and we have before us minutes of the September 4th, 2018 Special Stormwater Workshop meeting, the April 2nd, 2019 business meeting, and the April 9th, 2019 workshop. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes for Stormwater Workshop meeting of September the 4th, 2018, the regular business meeting on 4/2/2019, and the workshop of the township on 4/9/19 as prepared and circulated. Sorry.
Mr. Judd, are you going to
Second?
Second, please.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, well now, before we go to public comment, I would like to announce that prior to this meeting, the Board of Supervisors met in executive session, and we received information from the township manager, from the solicitor, and from Mr. Weaver. So with that, we'll move to public comment. Our public comment is for any item that is not on the agenda this evening. If you're here to comment on an item that's on the agenda, you'll have the opportunity to comment when we discuss that particular item. So if anybody is here to talk about, would like public comment on an item not on the agenda, Mr. Minsker, did I see your hand? Please give us your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Bill Minsker. I live on Linglestown Square, 5956 Linglestown Road rear, in what I like to refer as Lower Paxton's capital. A little bit of history before I give you my suggestion. A few years ago, we had the Village of Linglestown Committee that was in charge of the $6 million project to redevelop our village. There's one activity, one item that still remains to be done, and I would like to again remind the board it's a simple activity. To please consider this either in your upcoming discussions of activities for the township or in the budget. The item is very simple. This is a street light that was projected to be placed at the intersection of the north end of the roundabout, the west roundabout, and Blue Mountain Parkway. There's a 6 traffic movement intersection there, and we had projected a a street light that would be placed there to light that intersection. There's already a pole that's there. This just needs to be added to the township's street light list.
There's a pole, but there's no light fixture on the pole?
That's correct. There's no light anywhere in that area at that rather busy intersection. This has been mentioned before, but it just, I think, is forgotten. So I'm reminding the board again, this is the only item remaining from our project, and I think it's a rather important item, especially for traffic movement and safety at nighttime.
That was a PennDOT project, so I'm not quite sure how.
We pay the electric
Yeah,
bill, but I thought
absolutely.
that PennDOT would be putting up the light.
Correct.
So we'd
Pressing
probably,
that didn't
All we can
happen.
do is make contact with PennDOT.
We'd have to call
and ask
Penn-
what
The
the
light we
progress
had
is.
projected was not the type of street light that goes through Linglestown Road. It would be the gooseneck type that
Right.
is at the roundabout.
then we wouldn't.
But we'll
be
still
able
need to make the contact with PennDOT since they're ultimately responsible. And Bill, you may be correct, maybe it just slipped through their cracks.
Yep.
So
Mr.
I'm
Godchaux,
just
will we add that
reminding
to the
the board
list of
again. Thank
PennDOT
you.
issues?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. We'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a comment for an item not on the agenda? Yes, please come to the podium with your name and address. Now, this is for an item not on the agenda, Eric.
I got you the third time.
Okay.
Eric Epstein, 4100 Hillsdale Road. I'd like to speak to a number of items on the agenda.
Officers.
Why don't we just get it over with? Just 3 points. Most of these are informational. One is, I just want to clarify, we did complete a documentary on Blue Ridge Country Club. That's going to be released in the fall. I've had a number of requests about it. The documentary is about the country club, but also the demise of cultural country clubs in the country. So I don't want to really play my hand, but we hope to release it this fall. And I'm not really sure how that's going to roll out, but I was able to secure a lot of the archives from the country club before it was destroyed. So the present state of the country club, depending on where you're sitting at, is probably not what people had anticipated, but we hired a drone and filmed the entire country club in 2 days. So we actually have video archive of what it looked like. We also have a lot of records of what it looked like in the 30s. It used to be a farm, it was clear cut. So we have a lot of documents that we may be reaching out to you to work with to preserve. The documentary itself we did with GK Video. So although it's only 22 minutes, we have a substantial amount of archival material. The other update is on, if you remember, Gary was here, I don't know who else was, the Stray Winds project included an 8,500-foot walking path. If you go on Crumbs Mill Road, you notice that the last phase of the walking path should be completed. And it's heavily utilized, I think, for those of you who were on the board at the time. We had a dedication several years ago. So that turned out to be a really win-win-win situation for the developer, the community, and the municipality. Now, it wouldn't be me if I didn't have a gripe. So
I was waiting.
thank you. I just want to point out that a couple of years ago we raised the lag time between actually having minutes and then having the minutes posted. We're back till March 6th for the Planning Commission, and we're almost back that far for the supervisors. The plea I would make to you is that it's very difficult on an evening like tonight when you have important agenda items to comment when you're deprived of looking at the minutes. So the last approved minutes for the Planning Commission date back to March, similarly for the Board of Supervisors. So my plea to you, and it's not really a gripe, is that, like, I don't think the Planning Commission is televised. So the only way that you would know what's going on is through the minutes. I would actually want to put it on your to-do list and maybe raise that issue or elevate it so that folks that can't get to meetings have the opportunity to view what actually transpired. But March 6th is a long time not to have records posted.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Yes. Please come to the podium.
Katie Shive, 131 Oak Park Road, Lower Paxton. I don't have the sense of humor that Eric has, so I'll just start
You'll
now.
just get right to it.
I'll just get right to it. And no, it also is not on the agenda. It actually has to do with a discussion and a final development plan that was approved back in 2017. Mr. Kessler came before the supervisors in 2017 to request approval of final plans for commercial development of the property at 39 and Colonial Road behind Sheets. At that time, there was several waivers for the final plan, and there was a lot of discussion amongst the supervisors. There was a request for a waiver of sidewalk. There was some stormwater management talk. There was request for a waiver of the traffic control that may be necessary for this development. There was a lot of series of questions and back and forth. The one thing about the sidewalk, I know that the supervisors brought up and were pretty firm at first that we need a sidewalk, and then Mr. Kessler said it would ruin all of his final plans. He'd have to go back and redo all the development in order to get the green space that he needed and the stormwater control. So that was back in 2017. The final plan was approved, but it was approved with these kind of agreements between Mr. Kessler and the supervisors that a sidewalk would be installed if and when it was needed in the future. A traffic control signal would be installed if and when it was needed in the future. So my first question has to do with, since that time, there's been a turnover of supervisors, there's been a turnover of staff. How many supervisors actually remember or know about that particular dialogue with Mr. Kessler?
Well, I'm probably the oldest person here.
Well,
In
27.
terms of seniority. I need to clarify that. I mean, I do remember some of those discussions, but again, it's been a while. A lot of things have passed over this dais. Can I say absolutely I remember the night, the day, the time? No, I cannot. But yes, I do remember the early discussions.
Okay, well, my first concern and my first question is that final plan was approved. But it seems to me, for want of a better term, it was improved on a gentleman's agreement and a handshake that these improvements may be done in the future upon request.
Okay. Katie, may I just interrupt you? And I may be wrong on this, but I believe in those situations, and Amanda's not here. Oh, yes. Would you may correct me, but when those things are done, those are notes that are written on as opposed to just a verbal handshake.
Okay. Well, that was
it's written in there that when this occurs, this must be accomplished, and I know that that's written on those docs as opposed to just a verbal, hey, will you do this kind of thing?
Okay, I understand that. I know that they'd be documented in the
Yeah,
minutes.
it has to be documented.
So my first question is, when the future comes and these provisions for possible improvements come about, how are they legally enforceable? If Mr. Kessler chooses to sell the property and there's one or more owners that come along after him, would they be required to put in the sidewalks at the request of the township?
Is my understanding that, now again,
This
I'm
particular
speaking as one
incident.
person, Katie.
Okay.
It is my understanding that when they would go back to that plan, whoever has it still has to honor what's on that plan. That's my understanding.
All right.
And again, I'm one person. I haven't asked for legal advice on that. So I'm giving you right off the top of my head, my belief, my understanding.
Okay, well, I may do some further digging and get back to you, Supervisor Chrisman, on, is that what we can find out? Is that, because I'm curious, at that time in 2017, I was fairly new to some of the things that were going on, but
Again, that's
not so much.
2017, and who's to say that won't occur before 2020 or 2021 or 22?
Okay, correct.
Is there a reason why you're raising this
Yes.
question at this time?
Yes, because it goes up to the next point. During that discussion with Mr. Kessler, some concerns were raised by a number of residents, myself included, about the possibility that toxic material had been compacted in what was previously known as a unmonitored, perhaps, waste site. And there was a lot of discussion, and there were decades that this lot had gone just available to anybody that wanted to put anything. So the conversation was pretty serious about what we could do or what we wouldn't do, and Mr. Kessler agreed 2, conducting a number of boring tests
Right.
prior to disturbance of the land, because there was concern that if the land was disturbed and the rainwater came, the toxins would be released and Paxton Creek would be affected. So he was told, or he agreed to, I'm not saying he was told, he agreed to, because the supervisors chose not to do their own testing, he agreed to do testing. I haven't seen where that testing's been brought to any subsequent supervisors' meetings, and I'd like to know if that was done and whether the results are available to us, the public.
Mrs. Scheib.
And Katie, I think
It was
I'm-
brought up at a
yeah,
meeting.
I think they were completed.
I'm the one that asked that question.
Okay.
He did come back and stood at that podium.
Okay.
And he did tell us that he did do it, and I think he said it cost close to 20,000.
Really?
So that should be documented.
And he had to
and
produce those.
Everything was absolutely fine, because I'm the one that asked him to do that. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it is. He came back here. We're not going to have a back and forth
Yeah.
like
I was just
this.
asking a question if the results were available.
Yes,
Amanda?
yes,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
I'll check with, should I check with Amanda on those?
Yes.
Again, is there is something happened that causes you to raise
Prior
this?
action of the supervisors that I was just following up on to see whether.
Because it's
the
been
results-
several years, and the development is, I think, maybe moving along at a slower pace than what was anticipated. Okay, I just
take our
wondered if there
timing.
was a current problem that caused you to.
No, no,
Okay.
not at all.
Okay, good,
Okay?
good. Well, you can talk to Amanda and get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else have an item, as has been said repeatedly, not on the agenda this evening? Sure. Because and one thing I would ask everybody tonight, we have a substantial number of folks here who I am assuming are going to want to have input into items that are on the agenda. So
I can clarify this real quickly. It'll take a minute. We have a developers agreement with Mr. Kessler, and there are 3 items in the developers agreement. Some of those are time limited. In other words, if there's a traffic light that's needed within a certain amount of time, his pro rata share goes away. I think that is germane to tonight if we enter into the same kind of developers agreement with the people trying to develop this parcel. Secondly, I did look at the test that he provided. It never looked at soil. And when I did further investigation, I can't say for sure. It appears that the soil was taken from the Harrisburg State Hospital, and it was hazardous waste that was dumped there during Hurricane Agnes. Again, I'm not going to prolong it tonight, but I've been on top of this issue since the beginning.
Right.
And if you look at that report, I reviewed the report. We asked him to look at what was in the soil, not the compaction, not the compression. So just want to delineate that we still don't know what's in the soil, sir.
well, again, this all was thoroughly vetted 2 years ago, and since there's nothing that is causing a question at the moment, I'm just confused as to why we're even having the discussion at the moment. that's
Because the
all.
request we made from the beginning of that issue was we'd like to know what was in the soil. We never resolved that issue. So I'm just clarifying, you can look at compaction, you can look at compression. It doesn't mean you're looking at the elements, and you're going to have to revisit this issue at Blue Ridge when you figure out and find out how we're going to do that remediation. So I think it is germane.
Well, okay. Okay, any other items? And again, whenever we go item by item on the agenda, when you do speak, a reminder that we do ask you to please try to keep your comments to 3 to 5 minutes so that everybody has an opportunity. And the other thing, I think that a lot of people might be wanting to say the same thing. So let's try not to become overly repetitive, because we want to make sure that everybody who wants to be heard tonight gets a chance to do so. So if we can all just be respectful of time. With that, Chairman and board member comments, and I'll have, other than to congratulate our police department and staff on an extraordinary National Night Out last night. I hope many of you had an opportunity to be there. It was a tremendous event, and I'd like to offer congratulations to all involved on that. With that, other board member comments.
Sure, I'm going to do a follow-up to that.
Okay.
I'll try not to be redundant, Mr. Chairman.
Not be redundant.
Thank you. I just have 3 major thank yous for last night. First of all, to our first responders. Many times when we give thanks to our first responders, we stop at that point, but I think we need to extend it beyond our first responders and their support staff who maintain, help them, give them the support to do the job that they do so well for our community. And secondly, to all the volunteer organizations that were there last evening, and again, all staffed by so many volunteers of this community, which I think really says something very strong, very positive about this community, that we do work together, we do make things happen. And then thirdly, if you were there later, unfortunately this didn't happen at the beginning, but it happened later. Mission Barbecue last evening presented a check to our police department for $7,500, and also $7,500 to the Paxtonia Fire Company. And again, I think that's one more opportunity for our community to come together and where we share our resources with one another to make this community better. So I want to extend sincere thanks and appreciation to each and every one of those, not only the organizations, but the support staff that helped them. And I know there are several people in this room who were there last night volunteering, even directing people where to get their food, get in the right line. Those things really made things move very smoothly, quickly, and thank you. We appreciate that. Sorry.
Other board member comments?
Just out of curiosity, not including township personnel, board members, and staff, how many people were actually there last night by show of hands?
Oh, good.
Other than us.
Great,
We have a number of folks. Cool.
great. Thank you.
Mrs. Lindsay?
Yes, I am proud to say that Lower Paxton Township received this Silver Community Award from the Pennsylvania Municipal Leagues, and we were the 100th municipality in the state to receive that. And also, South Central EMS received the American Heart Association Gold Plus Performance Award, Achievement Award again this year, and I'm proud to say that they have done this 6 years in a row. So thank you to South Central EMS. They do for the township.
Mr. Judd, do you have any comments? No. Mr. Zumas, any further comments?
I do not.
Okay, great. With that, manager's report, Mr. Gottschall.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have one item tonight, and not to steal Ms. Urban's thunder, because I know she's in-house tonight, but merely to prime public interest on the matter. So again, our communications manager, Leanne Urban, has been vigorously working over the past few weeks on, among many other items right now, the implementation of the township's mass notification system through Civic Plus. Ms. Urban expects to have the new system up and running by early September of this year, of course. And so a public rollout of that system shall be forthcoming, and the board and members of the public should keep your eyes out for that very exciting announcement.
Great. I believe you also had a meeting with Representative Andrew Lewis relative to safety improvements on Union Deposit Road. Can you just very briefly fill us in on those?
Yes, sir. So upon the request of Mr. Lewis, I did meet in his office with his staff, as well as staff members from PennDOT, as well as members of Pannoni, an engineering firm who does work for PennDOT in some capacity. And the genesis, of course, of that meeting was some issues of pedestrian traffic along Union Deposit Road, and the outcome of the meeting was essentially through the state's LTAP program, which is basically the state's technical assistance program for local municipalities, is to have done a free traffic safety study of the corridor, looking at primarily pedestrian traffic, among some other minor issues, but primarily pedestrian travel along the corridor. And we expect that study to be done relatively soon. Pannoni was out taking a look at the area and putting together some information, but that typically would be done through the township's public safety department in conjunction with our own engineer. But as this was a state-initiated program, we were able to take advantage of LTAP and have their engineers do it for us at zero cost. So we anticipate the results of that study forthcoming pretty quickly.
And then that will tell us whether and where we can put crosswalks and other safety improvements in, which the state would allow us to do at that point?
Correct. Yeah. If the so we are able to do crosswalks on a state route if warranted. So the study will determine if they are warranted or not, and then some other ancillary things such as signage and things like that could be placed as a result of the study. Yes.
Great. Great. Well, thank you for being on top of that. And Robin?
Yeah, I have one more thing. I just want to remind everybody, tomorrow night is the last concert at Heroes Grove for the Parks and Recreation Department. It starts at 7, runs till 8:30, and it will be Mr. Music Man, so all are welcome.
Okay. Okay, with that, we will now move to old business, and our first item under old business is we need to take action on an application for payment number 1 for the 2019 Township Road paving projects. And the details, Mr. Gottschall.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as part of the 2019 Township Paving Program, HRG has transmitted to us this application for payment on behalf of our contractor, Pensy Supply Incorporated, in the amount of $339,165.77. The original contract price is set at $844,456.03, bringing the balance to finish at $505,290.26. Payment is recommended by our engineer, HRG, and Mr. Hines, who's joining us tonight, clearly. And that is all I have on this item.
Okay. Any questions from board members relative to this payment for Mr. Hines? No? Okay. Any public comment on paying for road paving? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the application for payment number 1 for the 2019 Township Paving Project in the amount of $339,165.77 as presented and recommended by Mr. Gottschall.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. Lindsay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Item number B under old business, we need to take action on bids for mini basin, sewer system improvements, and sanitary repairs. Melissa?
All right, as noted, we are looking for action on the bids that we received back on May 24th for this project.
Could you pull the microphone a little closer to you so everybody can hear you? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was saying we were looking for bids, or approval of the bids that we received on May 24th. This is a rather large sewer replacement project, and there's a lot of storm water replacement that has been incorporated into this one too. It's another project of your ongoing sanitary sewer replacement procedures that you've been doing over the years. The contract, the low bidder that we received, the bids we received, the low bidder was Dolly Construction Company with a total of $16,933,000, $333.25. Their bid was close to $1 million lower than the engineer's estimate and the second lowest bidder too. So we've worked with Dolly in the past. Don't see any reason why this one can't be awarded to Dolly as well. So just looking for approval.
And we're confident that even with the lower dollar amount, they're capable of doing the work?
Yes.
Yes.
And Melissa, is this in the Blues in Linglestown?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, most of the work is in the Blues, north of 81, east of Mountain Road. There's some other work that's scattered around too. There's a little bit of sewer replacement work needed over in the Spring Creek Basin prior to the lining contract that's going to be coming up.
And that was about 650 properties in Linglestown?
Yes, there's 650 properties in the Blues up there, north and south of Blue Ridge Avenue, yep.
Thank you.
Any other board member questions?
I have two questions, Mr. Chair. One to Mr. Weaver. Hearing this, seeing this, I'm making an assumption I don't like to. I'd rather hear from you that you have reviewed it and are recommending this.
Correct. Staff has reviewed the bid results with the engineer, and we recommend approval of the bid and award to Dolly Construction.
Thank you. My second question, Mr. Chairman, is to Mr. Stein. You have reviewed this, and everything is exactly as should be with regard to the document submission, et cetera.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have
Comments?
one more question. Mr. Weaver, do you know approximately when this will be starting?
I do. The contractor has reached out and asked what our timeline is. We do have some leadway in them starting because this project doesn't have to be done for 2.5 years. So they had indicated that they're going to mobilize in the end of September, and they hope to start in early October.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
Great, good. Thank you.
Anybody else? With that, would anybody care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the bids for mini basins BC2A, BC2B, BC2C, and BC5B for the sewer system improvements and the SC2B sanitary repair as recommended by Mr. Weaver in the amount of $16,933,333.25 to Dolly. I'm sorry.
Dolly. We have a motion on the
Thank you
floor
for-
I'll second.
and seconded by Mr. Zumas. Any additional questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That now brings us to new business. Item A, we have a number of subdivision and land development plans before us. The first is action on consolidation of a previously subdivided or two previously subdivided lots at 6443 Mo Lane Drive. Mrs. Zerby, good evening.
Good evening, board members. This is for the declaration of consolidation of lots for the Campbells. They've submitted the declaration for previously subdivided lots known as parcels 3566-346 and 3566-347, located at 6443 Moline Drive. The properties will contain 1.07 acres after the consolidation. The consolidation would allow the Campbells to add an accessory feature to their existing building lot, and staff recommends approval of this lot consolidation.
Just a quick question. Can everybody hear her? I'm having a little, wondering if the volume is loud enough. Okay, I guess everybody can. Good. Any board questions about the plan?
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Any public comment? Wow. Seeing none. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the consolidation of the previously subdivided lots of 6443 Moline Drive, Plan 2019-21, as presented and recommended by Mrs. Zerby.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Action on a final land development plan for Amber Fields, Phase 7A. Again, Mrs. Zerby.
Yes, the purpose of this plan is to reflect the two lot additions that have been added to the plan. The updated plan shows two strips of McNaughton-owned properties that are 25 feet wide being added to two abutting parcels owned by Jack and Cheryl Hurley. Staff recommends approval of this amended final subdivision plan. And Tim Malott of Malott Engineering is here to answer any questions.
Tim, could you come to the podium and we'll see if we have any questions for you this evening?
Good evening, Tim Malott, Malott Engineering, representing the plan before you. This plan was conditionally approved by the board, I think like 7 months ago approximately. And since that time, construction was about to begin, and one of the property owners along Devonshire Heights reached out to the McNaughton Company. They have a swimming pool in their rear yard and some trees that were close to the property line, and they worked out an arrangement with McNaughton for McNaughton to be willing to work with them to do the lot addition. So that's why you see the other part. It was a plan that was previously conditionally approved, was never recorded. We brought this change to the township, and the staff thought it was appropriate for us to come back before you for a reaffirmation.
Just to get in line. Right, Rand?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions?
No, again,
On the board?
very straightforward.
Any public questions or comments on this plan? Okay, again, seeing none, may we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the final land development plan for Amber Fields Phase 7A, which is Plan 2018-32, as presented by Ms. Zerbe with recommendation to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sir. Okay, that brings us to action on a final land development plan for Colonial and Linglestown roads. Again, Mrs. Zerbe, if you could explain the plan to us?
Yes, this plan proposes to develop an existing 1.36 acre lot at the southwestern corner of the intersection of Colonial Road and Linglestown Road. The development proposes to construct a 5,808 square foot retail store with 40 parking spaces. Additional site improvements will consist of landscaping, lighting, and stormwater management facilities. The site is located within the commercial neighborhood zoning district and will be served by public sewer and public water. This plan was approved at the July 3rd, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission requested the applicant to change 2 waivers requested by the applicant into deferrals. The applicant has requested the following waivers. The first one is the waiver for landscaping to be permitted within the easement areas. Staff supports the waiver request as the proposed landscaping will not obstruct access to the stormwater management system. Number 2, a waiver of the vertical datum referencing to be NGVD 29 instead of NAVD 88. We are in favor of this waiver because the original site data references this datum. The third is the applicant has requested a waiver for the number of trees per 100 square feet of island area. Staff supports the waiver request as the island areas are in close proximity to the proposed underground stormwater management facility, and the island appears to be adequately landscaped. The fourth waiver is for the curb depth in the parking lot to be 6 inches rather than 8 inches. Staff supports this waiver request as long as the 6-inch curb reveal depth is utilized on the interior of the site. So for the deferral, the waiver that was turned into a deferral, there are 2. The deferrals were requested by the Planning Commission at the July 3rd, 2018 meeting. At the request of the Planning Commission, the applicant agreed to turn the waiver request into deferrals for the requirement to provide sidewalk along Colonial Road and Linglestown Road, and for the installation of curbing along Colonial Road. The Planning Commission requested the deferrals until the Route 39-743 corridor study is completed and approved. The corridor study currently shows improvements associated with this intersection. Approval of the deferrals would require the developer to be financially responsible for the installation of the improvements in the future. Matt Fisher from RJ Fisher is here this evening to represent the plan.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, if you would come to the podium.
Good evening, Matt Fisher with RJ Fisher & Associates here to represent the plan. I wanted to start off by saying this plan was initially on the agenda for the July 16th board meeting. About 2 days before that, we received some comments from staff that there were some concerned citizens that had some questions. Obviously, a lot of them here tonight. So we wanted to push that back to the next meeting in an attempt to meet with them and discuss what their concerns were. Township staff reached out to them multiple times but never heard back any dates that worked for them. So unfortunately, we weren't able to arrange any meeting to discuss that prior to this meeting. Amanda summarized everything pretty well, so I'm not going to rehash too much of it, but I did want to kind of run down some of the testings and studies that we've had done to date on this property. So on the plan, all the stormwater is going to be controlled by an underground infiltration pit. We did have Kidlinski and Associates do infiltration testing on that showed adequate infiltration rates to support that kind of design. Wetland study was also performed by Vortex Environmental. That identified a number of wetlands along the southern edge of the site, as well as streams that drained into Paxton Creek that borders the site on the west. The plan doesn't propose any impacts or any disturbance to any of the wetlands or the streams surrounding the site. FEMA previously identified this area of Paxton Creek as a Zone A floodplain. So since our initial submission, which was back in 2015, we did a detailed HEC-RAS analysis to submit a LOMAR F to FEMA. In doing that, that was reviewed by both the township staff and the township engineer, submitted to FEMA, and we have since received FEMA approval for that Lomar F. And what that does, that takes the arbitrary line that they bisected the site with and actually defines the floodplain based on the actual grading and the actual flow of Paxton Creek in that area. Next would be with regards to traffic. We had a trip generation performed for a 5,800 square foot retail store. It generated a peak weekday trips of 22 trips, which is well under what the township threshold is of 100 trips, which would require a traffic study. So no traffic study was done on this project. The entrance on the Lingostown Road, we're all well aware there's a lot of turning lanes in various directions in that area of Lingostown. So we're proposing right in, right out, because that's the only turning movements PennDOT would allow in that area. With regards to the waivers, I did just want to add on to Amanda's comment regarding the waiver for the number of trees per 100 square foot of island area. That was at our recommendation of our landscape architect that was on staff. There just wasn't enough square foot of island for what the ordinance actually required us to put in the island. So we're not asking for a reduction in the overall plantings. Those plantings are still provided just elsewhere in the plan. So we basically redistributed what was required in the islands to other areas around the plan. So the landscaping total numbers are 100% per the ordinance. As Amanda pointed out, the deferrals for sidewalk along Colonial and Lingostown, as well as the curbing along Colonial, that was discussed in quite a bit of depth at the Planning Commission meeting, and they decided that rather than having the developer install something at this time that could be ripped out in a couple years, that it would be best to wait until that corridor study is complete. And then if and when that construction moves forward, then the developer would contribute those items at that time. So with that, I'd open it to any additional questions from the board.
Okay, board members, questions you might have?
Yeah, I just have a question. So if you're going west on Lingostown Road, okay, heading towards the city, so I would need to make a left on Colonial and then make a right into the retail store? Because you're saying right in, right out?
So the only entrance is on Lingostown. So if you're heading west on Lingostown, you would actually have to go down the street and turn around to be heading east onto Lingostown.
So I'm going to have to go down and turn around in somebody's business?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, or loop around on public streets.
Or loop around, okay.
Wouldn't that add considerably to the traffic flow in the area then? Above and beyond, I know you said 22 trips, but if they're 22 trips and they're going to be going down, looping around, possibly through a residential area, doesn't that pose a problem?
That's also assuming 100% of those trips are moving to the west. I mean, even if half of them are moving to the west, that still would be well under the traffic impact study threshold of 100 as well.
I don't think it's fair to the businesses that they're going to have to go in there, go through their parking lot, and then come back on.
Well,
come
obviously that would not
Road.
be the preferred method. The preferred method would be to turn around using public streets.
Well, actually, that would be worse because then you're going to be adding traffic to a residential neighborhood.
Right.
Which I think, that was one of my main concerns when I looked at this plan.
I'm sorry I took your...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I'm sorry that I took your question.
No, oh, no,
Okay.
not at all. Go, continue.
Yeah,
I want to build on it then.
Yeah, I'm done. That's just my main concern. How were you, if I was heading west, how was I going to get in there? Okay.
And I want to build on that. On the drawing, could you, and I see where Colonial Road is, I see where Lingostown Road is. Could you show me the entrances from both Lingostown and for Colonial into the property?
There is no entrance to the property from Colonial.
From Colonial?
Correct.
It is only from Lingostown?
Correct, and that's all the way in the northwest corner of the property.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm coming from Lingostown and I go through the traffic light at Colonial, I want to make a left-hand turn into that shopping center or into that that business, if you will. And there's the normal amount of traffic coming from the city on Lingostown Road. I don't know if you've done any traffic studies, but how long am I going to have to sit there to make a left-hand turn?
You can't.
Question one.
You can't, Gary.
Well, that
You
won't
can't
be
make a
permitted.
left-hand turn. So I have to go down Linglestown Road till I can find a place to turn around to return to enter the business.
Correct.
That's the only entrance and exit.
Correct. And that's dictated purely from PennDOT and the current lane configuration.
Oh, I understand PennDOT's involvement. That's why I wanted to be assured there was nothing on Colonial Road.
That's
Because
correct.
initially I heard that there was an entrance on Colonial Road, and that would create more of a problem than already exists.
Yeah,
Because
that's
of three
incorrect. There
Bs
was
and the
never
other
an
thing
entrance
that's
on
right on the other side, and that would never line up, and it's not within close distance enough to put another traffic light, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need even dwell on that issue. Okay, thank you.
What's to stop people? We're going to get to public comment in just a second, and everybody who wants to speak will have an opportunity to do so. What's to stop people from making a left turn?
So
Is there going to be a sign?
there will be multiple signs, and that traffic configuration with a pork chop, we went through probably about 4 or 5 different iterations with PennDOT to actually dictate that size and angles and whatnot. And the angle of the driveways are such that it would be very difficult for someone to make a left-hand turn into that property. So we're not having those entrances 90 degrees where it'd be very easy for someone to make that right-hand turn or left-hand turn in. I'm sorry.
Well, it's not easy for 18-wheelers to go through Linglestown Square, but they do on a regular basis, and it hasn't done our roundabout a whole lot of good. Well, anyhow, other board members.
And I don't expect to spend much time on, other than the fact that looking at this plan, I'm seeing 27 comments from HRG that need to be met. I don't remember the last time we had a project where there were 27 comments that would need to be completed. In addition to that, there's 7 specific notes from Tim Nolt. I'm not accustomed to seeing that many as well. So I'm having some problems with all of the, and I'll use this term, and please understand the term. But in order to get this plan satisfied, it's 27 hoops just for for HRG, 7 hoops from Tim Nolt, and we haven't even taken into consideration, and I know that it's mentioned here, but we've not addressed it, and that's the corridor study that may very well have a additional impact on this plan.
With all due respect, there is 4 technical comments on HRG's letter, and the rest being administrative items that need addressed, and or waivers and deferrals being listed on there.
When the ones I looked at,
From June 13th of 2019.
June 13th, I begin to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then it starts 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That's a very large amount when I normally am approving plans and that I have to approve them with HRG's comments. I'm just saying for me, that's a large number that I have to deal with. And also I understand, well, I know, I'm not understanding, I don't need to understand, I know it, that also are many hurdles for you, the developer, to jump through in order to make this in compliance. It was not a question, it was merely a comment that I'm making.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask real quick about the landscaping waiver?
Sure.
The township, as most people know, was compelled through federal government regulations to implement a stormwater fee to pay for reduction in sediment township-wide and a rather stiff reduction in sediment in the Paxton Creek watershed, which is located, which this property is located in with the creek nearby. You say the landscape waiver doesn't change the actual amount of vegetation on the site,
Correct.
and that this doesn't impact stormwater management at all?
No, I don't see how it would impact stormwater management at all, because we're still meeting all of the rate and the volume controls required per the stormwater ordinance.
Okay.
So, I mean, for instance, if you want to go back to the landscape plan, I believe each of those islands have 2 trees already in them. It would be nearly impossible to put more than that in those 2 islands. So we basically redistributed the additional required around perimeter areas where there is available space.
Okay, because that's it just, we're trying to explain to people the importance of stormwater management, and we're spending a lot of this money from the fees on adding vegetation, slowing down runoff, putting it in strategic places, which is a science that I'm just starting to get to understand. So,
Correct. So all the site runoff will be controlled in that underground infiltration bed. The landscaping in this case is almost purely for aesthetics as required by the township ordinance. Some of the landscaping you're probably being required for the stormwater management fees is more rain gardens with like more lower depressions that also have plantings in them as well. That's for additional water quality filtering in that case.
okay, thank you.
Anything else, Chris?
No.
Norm, do you have any questions?
I don't really have a question. I have a comment. Whether you deem it appropriate or not, I feel necessary to make it. I worked in that area for years, about a block from the intersection. I've been through that intersection a number of times. I'm not concerned about an inch on a curb, whether you reposition the trees somewhere else. I'm more concerned about the safe flow of traffic. It's been a concern of mine for years. As was mentioned, we have a draft plan on the Route 39 corridor that's not complete. Hopefully in a couple months we'll have some more accurate information. I don't like the fact that you have to go down past a certain way and make a U-turn and come back. I see that as a potential accident ready to happen. I think you're trying to defend an area that's just a poor location, considering the amount of traffic that's already there. It's very difficult. I mean, I understand your position, and I wouldn't want to be in your position, but to me, it doesn't pass the sniff test. There's just too many unknowns that may occur based upon what we already know. And that's not a question, that's just a comment.
I'm going to go back to the question I asked you first, and then you made a comment that you're going to place signs, no left turn.
Correct.
So I'm sitting at the red light at Colonial and Linglestown Road. I'm going west towards Harrisburg. Where am I going to see a sign that says I can't make a left turn into that retail store?
So I'd have to pull up the PennDOT plan that we submitted to be 100% sure. I'm nearly positive there's actually one on the far side of Linglestown Road. So on the sheet side within the PennDOT right away, there will be a no left-hand turn there, as well as other ones in the actual pork chop island, basically saying no left turn, and also like a do not enter.
So I'm going to be paying attention to the red light turning green, and my focus is on the retail store, but you're telling me the sign's going to be on the right-hand side.
One on both sides is my recollection of the PennDOT plans.
And many years ago, we asked PennDOT to close Union Deposit Road because we had a lot of people crossing over, and somebody would go to the person, go ahead, and then someone's coming up the lane and they would hit them broadside. So to me, if they decide to make that left-hand turn, even though it says they're going through the traffic and you have somebody coming down that right lane and somebody's going to say, go ahead, not seeing that car come down, they're going to get hit broadside. People are going to make that left-hand turn even though it says no, because everybody's in a hurry nowadays and they want to get there. So I just, and I'm just appalled that how would you guys like if people were coming through your business to get to another business because they can't get into it? They have to make that turn. So I'm upset that you're going to let other businesses take the traffic from the retail store. I just don't think that's a good way to get in and out. And as Mr. Zumas said, I think it's just a bad piece of land because of the traffic.
Well, and the other issue too is as close to proximity as it is to the intersection, if somebody does try to make a left turn, even though they're technically prohibited from doing it, it's going to back traffic up into the intersection and, make westbound traffic even more difficult, and it's already significantly difficult. You have your pork chop thingy there. I never heard that term before. I don't really think that's going to dissuade people at all. You know, sort of my view is that you're sort of trying to like put a square peg in a round hole here, and I just don't see the traffic flow working. That's my concern. But any other board member? Okay, with that, I assume there's public comment. Again, what I would like to ask is each member of the public, please give us your name and address when you speak. Bill, you can go first. Come to the podium to speak. Don't talk to us from the seats because there are people watching on TV and they won't be able to hear you if you aren't at the podium. And again, if we could sort of keep ourselves to 3 to 5 minutes so that everybody who wants to talk can.
My name is Bill Minsker, 5956 Linglestown Road Rear in Linglestown. I have a question. Am I seeing on this projection there would be land on the north side, the east side, and the south side of the building?
You may want to you might want to come back up here to answer questions because probably most of them are going to be directed to you.
That the building would be landlocked on the north side, the east side, and the south side.
Correct.
And am I seeing also that there are 3 parking spaces? There must be a sidewalk there in the middle at the entrance on the west. That there are 3 parking spaces to the north of that and 3 maybe 2 parking spaces and handicap. I'm not sure what that third is on the south side of the sidewalk.
Abutting right up against the building? Yes, sir. That's a row of parking with handicap spaces.
I'm speaking as a 55-year firefighter in Linglestown, which this is our territory. We have no access to that building. The only access we would have would be in the front. There's no fire lane there, and we are not going to make an approach into that building by going further west, doing a U-turn and coming back. That is a complete. Did this plan go before the Public Safety Committee, as I think all plans have to?
I think it did.
And they didn't comment on this?
I think it did, Bill.
Comment, Amanda, do you know?
I think I read that somewhere.
To a firefighter, that's very obvious.
Did I read that?
There's no signature from the fire marshal, but we do have the letter from the police department.
But no signature from the fire marshal?
No comments from the fire company?
It was dropped off, but on the plan review sheet that we get, no signature from the fire marshal.
Amanda, under general comments, item 4, I may be wrong in my interpretation, but it says, well, it doesn't say sign, but it says the plan has been reviewed by SCEMS, Fire Chief, and Public Safety. That was under the general comments. So I made an assumption that they had reviewed it.
Well, they should have reviewed it. They received it.
But did
We
they
just don't
approve
have
it?
I
Well, the
don't-
next sentence says the plan is approved as proposed. I'm interpreting that sentence that they have. That's my interpretation, Bill, of what I'm reading.
There was an email to the fire marshal. It's just not included in your packet.
Okay.
Okay, I was going to say.
But again, I didn't need that, only when I read that statement, I interpreted that statement to mean, yes, that they had reviewed it.
Well, then I am not speaking on behalf of the fire station. I am speaking on behalf of myself
I
as a
understand.
very experienced firefighter, that this is an unbelievably difficult plan. If we have a fire in that building, we can't get to it.
And I concur with you, Bill.
Thank you.
But that's only me, remember?
I hate to say it publicly, but I agree with you, Gary.
That's twice today.
That's twice today. I got to stop that.
Board members.
Who would like to speak next? Surely somebody else is going to want to address this. There's a whole lot of folks here. Anybody else wish to comment on the plan? Ask question. You can. This is your opportunity to ask any questions or comments. We'll go. Katie, if you could come over and be in line after her.
My name is Jane Matteo. I live at 4300 Wimbledon Drive, and I'm the president of Kensington Place Homeowners Association, which is located approximately a quarter mile from the property in question. I speak not only for those residents, but on behalf of the many residents whose properties will potentially be dramatically impacted by this project. We are opposed to the granting of waivers requested by the developer for the following reasons. First, I feel compelled to point out the words of the Lower Paxton Township Comprehensive Plan. Countless numbers of citizens gave input to this plan, which was finalized on August 8, 2018. Most particularly, I reference page 62, putting this plan into action, goal 8.1. And I quote, promote substantial citizen input, including making sure residents are well informed about community issues and have plentiful opportunities to provide their opinions on township matters, unquote. How can this goal be ignored less than 1 year later? Citizens have not had the chance to review the minutes of the July 3rd, 2019 Lower Paxton Township Planning Commission meeting, as they have not yet been published. Is this substantial citizen input? It is our understanding that the Murphy Properties Plan was approved at that meeting. Second, the township supervisors approved a stormwater management fee in late 2018 to create the funds to be used to reduce sediment from stormwater discharges. The Murphy Plan is requesting variances which may cause stormwater issues, but again, the citizens have not had ample opportunity to review and comment on these requests. Lastly, I want to point out that the proposed development is located adjacent to one of the few remaining historical structures in the township. My neighbors and I feel that it is urgent that the supervisors also take this fact into consideration for this or any other project on this parcel and require appropriate design and placement of a structure on the property. I propose that your vote concerning the Murphy Plan be delayed until the citizens have had ample time to review the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Hackendy. I live at 1724 Bennington Drive, Harrisburg, Lower Paxton Township. I am representing the Paxton Creek Watershed and Education Association, and I am a registered professional geologist. And I apologize to you, I have not seen the second and third pages of this plan where you may in fact have this information provided, but I do have questions about the infiltration gallery. Number one, where the gallery discharges, and number two, how it will be maintained, as it will certainly become clogged with sediment.
So the discharge of it, you can see the blue line going down kind of the middle of the parking lot. Do you see where that discharge? Yep, right there. That's where that would discharge out into the wetlands. And as with any infiltration BMP, there's going to be regular inspection and maintenance required to it. So there's various manholes where we can inspect it, and also various perforated pipes in there that we could regularly flush out if sediment does accumulate in them. There's also every inlet in there leading into that is going to have a water quality filter to prevent any debris from the parking lot and running down into that inlet and going into the underground infiltration area. Because we do understand that can definitely be a long-term maintenance issue, so we want to make sure anything underground, we minimize any maintenance cost associated with that.
And the property owner will be responsible for that maintenance?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Katie Scheib, 131 Oak Park Road, here in Lower Paxton. I have a question regarding the deferment of sidewalks, which, if I understand from your presentation, is contingent on the Route 39 traffic study. But you said two different things during your presentation. One was that sidewalks would be deferred until the study was completed, The other comment you made was that the sidewalks are requested to, and curbing, are requested to be deferred until construction begins. So I'm assuming that's construction of the intersection based on the Route 39 traffic study. Is that correct?
That's what the discussion was at the planning commission meeting, was their intentions of switching it to a deferral. At the end of the day, being a deferral, the township can call that at any time. You can't necessarily attach additional conditions onto a deferral. So it's not going to be directly tied to the construction of that Route 39 corridor study. That was purely the intention of the planning commission when they made that motion.
Okay, then I will come back and say, ironically and coincidentally, it seems to be connected to what I said during public comment. Because if deferment is contingent on when the supervisors choose, I was at the public meetings for the traffic study, and the engineer was quite clear that it was a conceptual plan, maybe never to be implemented, but if it were implemented, it would be at least 5 to 10 years. So if the plan is done, what month are we in? This is August. Say the plan is done and approved and whatever in October. Based on the plan and based on what you just told me, when are the sidewalks going to go in?
When the township staff requests that.
Okay. One last thing and then I'll be done. I'm going to request that the supervisors deny the deferral, require the sidewalks and the curbing be implemented now, because then we don't have any concerns about the traffic study, what it's going to say, when it's going to be implemented. And it's not our fault that the developer may have to put something in that subsequently 5 to 10 years down the road may have to be ripped out. It's their choice to develop that property now, or they could defer to develop that property until that intersection is confirmed. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Before we go to the next comment, we have a clarification on the fire police issue. Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, just to clarify the comments from the police department, when we get a comment letter, review letter done by the fire department, South Central EMS, and the fire chief and fire marshal, they have independent review of the plan. So we have an approved plan from the public safety director, an approved plan from the patrol division commander, and we have comments that need to be addressed by the traffic safety unit. Those comments that are outstanding on the plan, for the plan to be approved, those comments have to be addressed. The outstanding comment from the fire marshal is, the fire marshal responsibility is to indicate the fire department hookup on the building and for a fire lane. It's not uncommon for plans to move through with comments still needing to be addressed. They become condition of plan approval. So there's always a follow-up for those items to be addressed prior to approval. There wasn't that there's a lack of review of the plan. It's independent of each organization within the respective units.
Good.
Nick, I understand what you're saying, but what I don't understand is, what if something happens down the road that will not allow something to be done and the plan was approved? What do you do then?
The comments that are on the letter have to be satisfied before the plan can be recorded. So the plan can't be recorded and no construction can begin if the comments aren't satisfied.
So we could approve it, but then those comments have to be all
the comments that are listed in your memo and from HRG, from the sewer authority, from the public safety director, all of those comments have to be completed before we allow the plan to be recorded.
Yes. Okay, yeah. That's what I thought. I just wanted to clear it up so you know.
Okay, next.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Davis. I live at 72 Fairfax Village. My concern is about Lingelstown Road, and it's something I haven't heard anybody mention yet. I don't see on the plan exactly where the entrance is into Sheets, but there are just two entrances into Sheets. One of the major entrances is if you're coming east on Linglestown Road, you're going to turn left into Sheets. So if somebody is ignoring those signs that say no left turn, people are going to go straight into each other.
Yeah.
Further than that, if they have to go down and turn around in one of the businesses, not wonderful, or if they go down and turn around into the, what is the large apartment and residential area up on the hill, it's just not okay. Anyway, Sheets is my big concern because people are always and they're getting in that lane to turn left onto Colonial Road. And in a situation like today, where coming from the river to Patton Road, it took 25 minutes. So if you're trying to go eastbound and you want to turn left onto Colonial Road, you're going to get in that middle lane as soon as you can. And you're not watching for somebody coming the other direction. That's my concern. Thanks.
Ann Wayne, 2397 Via Toscana. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Supervisors, thank you for the opportunity to provide a public comment. I wish I had been able to prepare better with a lot of the information that was just presented by Mr. Fisher. So I am not going to go through the previously submitted Paxton Creek Watershed and Education Association testimony or statement. I am going to go off script though. I just want to point out to everyone that an organization like ours is not here to support or deny or express please support this or please don't support this. We're here to educate people on the realities and the science of stormwater management and protection of our creeks and specifically the Paxton Creek watershed. I just want people to be aware that this corner is a critical area for the Paxton Creek watershed. The creek flows through the western boundary of the Murphy property. There was a 100-year floodplain on the western side, but apparently that's been changed by some more recent studies, which I was not privy to when I was researching this. An unnamed tributary to Paxton Creek and a wetland are located on the southern segment, as Mr. Fisher pointed out. I would like everyone to know that a Manada Conservancy conservation easement exists. It is in place between the subject property and the paved area to the north of Greystone Public House. Manada is a local land trust. They have worked with the township on a recent preserved spot up on the mountain ridge called Elizabeth Woods. They are also not here to approve or disapprove of zoning ordinances and whatever their variances. Again, they are trying to protect these precious resources of our creeks and our watershed, and it does all tie in, I'm sorry to say, to the Susquehanna and the Chesapeake Bay. And I know everyone has varying opinions on why these mandates exist and why the stormwater fee has been levied, but I will say that Paxton Creek Watershed and Education Association supports and appreciates Lower Paxton's ongoing efforts to reduce the sediment load in order to meet the TMDL standards. So returning to the Manada Conservancy conservation easement that borders this, what we're talking about tonight, they call this a high protection area easement. It ensures that vegetation is maintained as a riparian buffer for these waterways. And by waterways, I mean the creeks and the unnamed tributaries, as well as the wetlands. I'm going to read from Manada's website. I'm glad I printed this out. They're describing the conservation easement that is directly behind or adjacent to this property. It's called an oasis along the Paxton Creek. Behind the commercial strip development on Linglestown Road and between the patches of suburban sprawl along Colonial Road meanders the Paxton Creek. It traverses scattered housing, was rerouted for Interstate 81, and it feeds Wildwood Lake and the Susquehanna River. Draining a 27 square mile area northeast of Harrisburg, the Paxton Creek is a threatened resource, and it needs every inch of protected forest buffer that it can get. Thanks to Doug and Nadine Niditch, it got some more. A 27-acre oasis for wildlife and water quality in Lower Paxton Township will now be off limits to further development and disturbance. These are your neighbors. Doug Nidich is no stranger to conservation, as evidenced by the careful planting of PA native trees, removal of invasive plants, and maintenance of the mature native woodlands that border the creek on his land. It goes on to praise the Nidiches and to thank them for doing this high protection area conservation easement. Now, I would just like to point out the irony of standing here tonight and talking about putting in 40 parking spaces, a traffic problem, to say the least, and, you know, these high-tech underground stormwater storage, what are they called? Irrigation galleries, that, you know, we hope they're going to do their job. We hope that they're going to be maintained. They are going to fill up with sediment. So it's just very ironic to see the preservation, the conservation, and then this. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Good evening. Dan Matteo, 4300 Wimbledon Drive. My questions are I have a clarification point. You made a reference earlier in your remarks about a number of 1,500 square feet and 22 people, or that had to do with something about flow of traffic or trips. Trips, excuse me. Okay. Is it not incorrect that using a 1,500 square foot measure for, but you said, I was sure you said 1,500. You did say 58. Right. So only 22 trips per day? Why would you even do it? I mean, seriously, why would you do this for that? That's all I got to say.
Depends on the business. If it's high-end jewelry.
Well, yeah, I don't know what the business is.
Right.
Again, please remember to give us your name and address. Thank you.
Sue Shabowski, 4333 Outer Bridge Crossing. That's Victoria Abbey, which is also in North Colonial
Excuse me,
Road.
could you pull the mic in just a little closer for my benefit?
Thank you.
Sue Shabowski, 4333
Thank you.
Outer Bridge Crossing. That's in Victoria Abbey on North Colonial Road. Dan, I think, stole my thunder. I was going to ask that same question for clarification. So it's 22 trips per day. So this business is expecting to have 22.
Can I clarify that?
Yes, please do.
So it's 22 peak PM trips. So there'll be more trips slowly throughout the day. But in the peak PM hour, that's when there's 22 trips, and that's what the township traffic study requirement is based on, the peak number of trips.
So 22 peak trips per hour. Is that what?
In the PM peak hour.
Okay, but it's an hourly rate.
Correct.
Not
and
a.
that would be the highest hourly rate in the evening hour.
That's different.
May I ask what this business is?
It's undefined at this point. I'm not even sure what the business is. It's just a spec retail building at this point, as far as I know.
How do you know how many
how
trips?
would anybody be able to project a trip?
Good point.
There is standard traffic study requirements, and one of the standard traffic study classifications is retail store. So there'll be a typical trip generation per a retail store. So, I mean, if they wanted to put like a Starbucks in here with a drive-through, like that's a totally different trip count.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd have to come all the way back through this process if we wanted to put something that's incredibly high volume, such as that kind of use. It's a retail store with a drive-through.
But you're asking for approval for something that we don't really know the volume. Because if it does become, quote, a Starbucks, then that number is invalid.
And we would have to come back through this process for a reapproval because we're changing the use of the site.
Okay, so there are 40 spaces. Will that also change, depending on who the tenant is?
The way the plan sits currently is the way it's intended to be built.
Intended?
So if there are substantial changes from that plan, again, it would have to come back through the process. So if all of a sudden we go from 40 spaces to 20 spaces, we'd have to be coming back through the process and have the plan re-reviewed if there's going to be substantial changes of that nature.
Okay. I'd just like to reiterate what I agree with several of the supervisors who said, there's some pieces of land that shouldn't be subdivided into a parcel, and somehow along the way this became a little scrap of parcel that's available, and there's some land that should never be built on, and I think this is one of them.
Bad news is I'm back. Eric Epstein, 41 Hillsdale Road. The good news is I'm going to be brief.
Thank you.
I am a historian, so I just want to provide a little context. This township has made it clear that sidewalks are a priority for interconnectedness. We've had challenges with greenways. So the context I want to provide you today is that if you're looking at the old farm at Progress in Inglestown, that's going to be developed. Blue Ridge is being developed. Sports City likely will be developed, and I think you'd have to be naive to think that Bumblebee is going to remain a driving range. So everything we do should probably be done with the context of what's coming next. We as a community have said, look, we do want connected sidewalks, and we also, if you recall, had a strategy that Inglestown Road would primarily be business campus with setback space. Now, I don't know if those visions are still in play, but I just wanted to remind folks of that. The other thing is we had a vision where we would minimize drive-throughs. Blue Ridge is not supposed to have any. That was part of the ongoing discussion. And I need to bring that up again because it looks like Blue Ridge is now considering a drive-through, but that was explicit. So I'm a little concerned here on things that we've agreed to, committed to, seem to melt away. I also want to make sure that we're clear here. I wrote, and you have a copy of what I wrote, Amanda. You could have got a hold of me at any time. The organization has been around for 13 years. My address is there. Everybody knows my phone number, 717-635-8615. I had countless emails to Amanda looking to get together with you. So I would appreciate if we're going to be frank here is that we reached out and we tried to meet with you. It wasn't us who didn't respond. I didn't even know who you were until today. You should have known who I was. I assume you had copies of those comments. Did you? Yes. Thank you. My name was on it. Easy to get a hold of me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm the most visible, fat, old, white Jewish guy you can see. So you put some heels on me and you got a fourth fromage on. So let me just say this. Hopefully my mom's not watching. Sorry, Mom. I did submit comments. I do not want to read them. I don't think any of us has the time for them. And like I've done in the past and tried to do is engage, find a middle ground, because we have three pillars here. You have the community, you have government, you have a developer. So we had wanted to meet prior to this. Swan recently had a meeting. We continue to want to meet. I just want to make three really quick observations. I also said it's still frustrating, and I hope we can get through getting the minutes up in time. And we did not have access to this. So my comments were based on the limited data I had at the time. I would have us look at whatever happens here, whatever developers agreement was signed with Eric and Vanguard. I also reached out and talked to Mr. Lucas. Probably should be in play for these folks as well out of a sense of fairness. In addition to that, and I think this has probably been hit a number of times, all of us here have worked on the corridor study since 2015. Swan actually did the grant proposal. We're almost done. You guys have had the workshops right here. I just want to leave this, and I don't know if we need to do it, a copy of my comments, but a copy of the draft recommendations. Make it clear what they, again, they're draft. If you could include that in the minutes, you'd be in my will, although you may be disappointed. I'd like to see these things that we work on so hard out, the comp plan, the Route 39 study, the commitment to sidewalks, the commitment to a business campus. Either we have a vision of as a community or we don't. Frankly, I think that lot would be ideal as a welcome garden for Lower Paxton. You know, there's some areas that don't need to be developed. Instead of it being what it is. By the way, I want to point out there's a reason why Forest Hill Commons doesn't have an entrance, ingress or egress on Inglestown Road. It's on Colonial for a reason, and you may want to talk to Mr. Kessler about that. And I think Mrs. Lindsay brought up a really good point. I'm not really sure it's fair to other business owners. Finally, I just want to say this, is that this is always the worst place to be in. You always seem to get the biggest crowds when people are not supporting something. But I just want to say, from our perspective, and I'm no longer chairman of SWAN, we're not a NIMBY group, we're an engagement group, we're a community group, we're a resolution-based group. I think anybody with any sense of fairness and equity looks at that intersection and says, man, this is probably not a piece of property we want to develop. So let me just say this as a solution. It would be great if we could have a welcome garden there, have a bright spot for our community. I don't want to take Bill Minsker's thunder about Linglestown, but there's other areas that could use some beautification, and this may be one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Yep. One of you has to go. An outbreak of over-politeness here.
Okay, I'm Bob Fisher, Matt's father. So I've been here a few years, and Eric does know me. Our number is right on the plan right there. So, I mean, we reached out, the letter was to the board. So we reached out, we tried to coordinate through the township to set up a meeting, gave numerous dates since the last one, and it didn't happen. But, I mean, we're definitely willing to communicate. But every comment that Eric brought up on that letter, we've addressed. We've met the township ordinance. I heard some comments tonight about the fire access to this, and when you look at this site compared to what's immediately across the street, I think it was about 25 years ago, I did the Sheets project immediately opposite this. You can't get to the back of the Sheets property at all. So this has much better fire access than that does. It's not the prettiest property. It is a wart. You got to do what you can do on some of these, though. It's no different than you go out to 22 and you have a divided highway. And there, everything is a right in and right out. I know when we did the Sheets property across the street, actually when we went before the zoning hearing board, that was initially rejected because we had a right in, right out. They didn't want any access to it. But it is a property. I mean, if the township really wants to buy it for a park or something like that, I'm sure the owner might want to entertain that. But my question is, who's going to go in there and maintain it? And then who's going to go in and visit it? So it is a tough property. There are problems with it, but I think we are meeting the township ordinances. We're meeting the PennDOT requirements. We've addressed all the stormwater requirements. We're meeting those. We're not going to do anything to Paxton Creek. We're doing the underground infiltration. We're maintaining. Nothing's being touched with the wetlands there. So although it may not be under a conservation easement, it's not being touched. We're not proposing any disturbance or anything to any of the wetlands. We've dealt with FEMA. We've dealt with all the floodplains. So when you go down the checklist of what your ordinance requirements are, we have that. We think the Planning Commission's suggestion of putting a deferral on that makes sense because then we can put the sidewalk and curbing and other improvements where they're supposed to be. I know we kind of had the same issue with Sheets, again, 25 years ago. PennDOT was coming through to do a widening of that section, but they wouldn't share those plans with us when we did the widening for Sheets. So we had to do the best we could, and they gave us a permit for it. But I don't see anything on this that we don't meet the township ordinances with, and it's really just a situation of, how do you want to deal with those couple waivers that we have really on the plan? Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Frayne. I'm from 2730 Woodrow Avenue. I'm here on behalf of SWAN. Up until a minute ago, I thought I had nothing to talk about, but it is true that you're meeting all the ordinances, except for the waivers that he's asking for tonight, and that's why we're here. I was thrilled to hear what was being said today. A couple things that I noticed is that one of the things I'm hearing from the Board of Supervisors is that you're taking the idea that waivers be granted or don't be granted when they're not contrary to public interest and when the property involved is subjected to unnecessary hardship or peculiar to itself. And another thing that the law states is that a landowner's mere economic hardship, if not permitted to pursue his plan, does not support the grant of a variance. Two things I think are really important here. Regarding traffic problems, we already went through that. It's obvious that that's going to be concerned. I'm wondering, with the trees that were being planted, if they're not going to be planted in the island, where are they going to be planted? Could you show me that?
Correct. So this is our landscape plan right here. It's not that we're putting no trees in the island. You can see both islands actually have 2 trees, as well as various shrubs around them.
Right.
The issue was, per the ordinance, it would require an even greater amount in those islands. And at that point, they'd be overplanted, and there would be no way to even fit all of the plantings required per ordinance in those islands.
So the islands could be bigger.
But then, if the islands were bigger, they then require more plantings because it's a per 100 square foot requirement.
Right.
So
the islands could be bigger.
the islands can always be bigger,
right.
but then they'd require more plantings that would also then again not fit in the islands.
So where are they going to be planted?
They're distributed around the site. I don't know exactly where the ones that were to go in there are, but the overall number of plantings on the site is taking into account those that would be required in those islands.
Okay. The other thing that I was concerned about is the idea that, planting some of the ornamental planting, I think you called it, rather than planting in the islands, you want to plant in the easement itself, right? That's what the application says. That's what the waiver's for.
Correct. A portion of the plantings are within the stormwater easements as we have an offset from the underground facility.
Yeah, so in other words, you're just going to replace plants. I think Ms. Wayne was talking about the idea of riparian buffers. So you're just going to replace plants that are already there. You're not going to add new plants. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Hey, I'm not sure what you mean by replacing plants that are already there.
So I'm talking about the easements there. Right, and they're already there. There's already
We
stuff
just drove by
planted.
there this afternoon, that's all.
Right, but down here.
We're not clearing down that slope. Like, once you go down that slope, we're not going to be clearing that
You're
area.
asking to put plants in the easement area.
For the new stormwater
That's
easement
right.
areas.
That's right.
Correct.
And if there's an easement, what is the use of having an easement if you're going to negate the easement?
The purpose of the easement is for future maintenance of the stormwater facility.
I guess what I'm saying is, there is an easement down, so what you're saying is you're not going to plant in the easement area that's already there?
There is no easement area already there.
I thought there was a...
There's a floodplain and a wetland area. The easement, the other lady was
Right.
talking about was to the south.
So what I'm making sure, I want to make sure you're not planting down in this.
Correct. There's no plantings down in the wetland area.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So I guess I'm not sure why that waiver is needed then. I guess that's my concern, my question. If I don't understand that.
So, if I may explain, the waivers for being able to put plants in proposed easement areas that are from the new facilities going in, not from any existing wetland areas on the site.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. Obviously, I'm not as well versed in this area as the engineer is. Basically, what our proposal is that the waivers be denied, obviously, for many of the same reasons. I'm not going to rehash them as were already brought up. Although, in lieu of the waivers, we would be more than willing to meet in a public forum with the owner, the landowner, to see if there's a way that we can work with them so we can come up with some solutions that benefit the landowner as well as benefit the community. Stray Winds area neighbors, we appreciate what you're doing. We appreciate what the Board of Supervisors is doing. And I'm sorry, I got a little nervous here. So it's okay. So we look for ways to benefit the owners, respects stormwater management best practices, fits in with ongoing efforts of the township to meet the TMDL standards for Paxton Creek, and is keeping with the Lower Paxton Township Comprehensive Plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to be heard on this matter? Please come to the podium.
Bob Woodbridge, 4311 Ashton Drive. I appreciate Mr. Fisher Sr. coming to the meeting tonight, and I will say from the start, I hope anybody that builds a business in the township succeeds. We all were tired of failed businesses and failed strip malls and all that. I hope it succeeds. But I think your comparison that you made about a business on Jonestown Road and Route 22 and the business at this site is a little unfair. If I were to present to the township that I want to buy or build a gas station on Route 22, I would say that. Or if it's a pizza shop or a multi-store shopping center on Jonestown Road, I would present that to them. They could make an educated decision. You're presenting us with a proposal. You don't know what the business will be. You said so yourself. It could be a pizza shop and a nail parlor. It could be a gas station. Best case scenario, it could be an office building that employs 50 people. Wonderful, no volume, all that, good employment. But that brings us to this problem, and I guarantee you, knowing the working force around the township or around the nation, when people are trying to get to work at 8 in the morning and leave there at 5 at night, they will do anything to get in and get out of that business. Your business, due to the bad location, provides only one way in and one way out. And I know at 5 o'clock on a Friday that is going to be a traffic nightmare when people are trying to get in some direction to get home. They're not all going to follow the rules. I can guarantee you that. I've lived in this township long enough, and I've seen crazy things happen. So I think it's a little unfair to present to the township a plan that, let's face it, has a lot of adversaries here, a lot of adversity to it, and that you can't even say how much traffic it's going to generate. I hope it succeeds, but worst case scenario, in 2 years, you have a vacant building and a bunch of macadams sitting there with a runoff problem that's putting sludge into a creek, and no one cares about it anymore. That's the worst thing that can happen. I hope it doesn't. But I think you're asking them to make a decision based on very little positive knowledge about the plan. So I just think you, as board members, you should wait until you have a better idea of all this, maybe a better traffic plan, and I think when you do take the vote, you should ask yourself this question: do we need it? Not, can we stop it, but do we need this? And I think that's the question you should ask yourself. Do the people of Lower Paxton Township need this? That's, I hope, the question that guides your votes in most every matter that comes before you. Thank you.
Thank you. You ready? I thought I saw somebody else who was lining up. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Eileen Hurley. I'm Secretary of SWAN, 1610 Elbridge Road, Harrisburg, Lower Paxton Township. I was curious if it's planned, how high the building is going to be, if it would be obstructing the historical Greystone.
How many stories is the building?
It is just a single-story building proposed.
Single story.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Now is your opportunity.
Eric, you sure you're done?
But don't poke the bear. Don't poke the bear. Ma'am, you wanted to comment before we go further? Okay, thank you.
My name is Marilyn Nye. I live at 4925 Janelle Drive, Harrisburg, 17112 in Lower Paxton Township. And a lot of what I'm hearing is what I'm going to be also saying. You're planning to build a building and a parking lot that's too large for the spot you're going to put it. Impacts the the stormwater and the creek and the easements and the wetlands and needing waivers for all of that stuff, has only one way in and one way out that people aren't going to be able to get to, is an unknown, nobody knows what it's going to be, and, nobody knows if it's going to succeed because we have an awful lot of buildings that are built that stay empty, and then we have buildings that get empty after they've had things in them. It just seems like there's really no point to that. It seems like it's the wrong building, the wrong place, the wrong size, the wrong everything. So I just feel as though for all the reasons, no waivers because we don't need any further impact on our stormwater runoff. We as citizens attended a meeting here several months ago where we acknowledged that we have a stormwater runoff problem. We are all chipping in, every resident in the township, every church, every business, every school is all chipping in financially to try to solve our stormwater runoff problem. So we just don't need something that's going to impact it even more, particularly something that we don't even have any idea what it is and if it's even going to succeed. And there's one other thing that I wanted to point out. I think it was you who asked this question. All this sediment that's going to get into this stormwater thing, and you said the owner of the property is responsible for cleaning it out. Who's going to be the owner of the property? Who's going to hold that person accountable for making sure that this stormwater system that you're putting in continues to function the way it's supposed to function? Because it seems to me developers go ahead and they put things in and they have these things in the ground where the water's supposed to settle in, and they have all this stuff, and then off they go. And who's responsible then? And how does anybody find out what their responsibilities are for maintaining it? So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? One more time. Anybody else? Okay, with that, that takes us back to board for any additional board questions or comments that might have come up as a result.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Amanda, I have a question for you. Is this the last day for action on the plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Then, Mr. Fisher, I have a question for you, please. Well, I have two questions, actually. Question number one, because we've not had this recorded for tonight, and it is imperative that it be memorialized in writing. Are you able to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Yes.
So any comments you make would be a commitment on the part of the applicant, correct?
Yes.
Good. Number two, in light of everything that we've heard and the data we received from staff and their comments from the community tonight, I have a request of you, and that will determine what direction I move. My question to you is, because the deadline is today, would you be willing to provide an extension of 1 week until next Wednesday night for action on this plan before this board?
Yes.
You are. Okay. Hearing that and having that recorded.
He should write that out.
Yes, yeah, that needs to be put in writing. I just the verbal, I know that it's being memorialized, but I would appreciate a written statement if you're tonight before you would leave here.
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Why don't we have it in writing before we take any action?
All right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We'll take 1 minute. Can you please write that? Give me an extension.
We'll recess for a couple minutes to allow that.
We have a form we can have
You
him
have a
sign.
form? Where is
Can
the
we
form?
make clear, Mr.?
I can print it in 2 minutes.
Please get
Okay,
it.
please
Can we
do it.
explain what we're talking about when we say deadline and last night?
Yes.
Yes. If I will say this, if in fact you're willing to give this board an extension until next Wednesday night,
It's just next Wednesday.
it's next Wednesday, even though we will be meeting on Tuesday. We need that extra day. What I would suggest to this board, and I would highly recommend to this board, is if their board is willing, I would make a motion to table the action on this until next Tuesday night. And for the reason, one, it gives this board the opportunity to review and to have clarified information that has been provided to us by staff. and also to weigh all of the comments that have been made by this community. And I think when we have that kind of information, this board can make a much better decision than to make it tonight with this where it is right now. But we cannot do that. I would have to make a different motion tonight if you were unwilling to do the extension. But at this point, if you're willing to sign that, then I would like to make a motion before this board to table it until next Wednesday, even though we would meet Tuesday, to take into consideration receiving clarification information from staff and to weigh heavily the information that we've received from our community.
And yes, we're willing to do that.
I think we also heard testimony this evening that some members of the community felt that there was not sufficient time to comment on it because of the non-publication of the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting. So by allowing another week, that would give people an opportunity who have been here tonight to weigh this information and give folks another week to digest information if they would like to be here next week to add further comment. So as soon as Nick returns with said waiver paper,
at least that would be a motion I would put on the floor. I don't know if it will be seconded and endorsed by this board, but that is my thinking and suggestion and recommendation at this point, Mr. Chairman.
okay, can you make it that upon signature of the extension
that.
papers that we would table the motion? Can you make that?
I can do that. Mr. Chairman, upon receipt of the agreement by Mr. Fisher, who is the official, who can speak on behalf of the applicant's signature, extending the consideration on the action on the final land development plan for Colonial Ingalls Road until Wednesday, August the 14th, 2019, that this motion be tabled until Tuesday, August the 13th, 2019.
What's that, Mr. Judd?
I want to know, with the timing and the deadline, why the delay would only be 1 week.
I'm giving 1 week for us to make our final consideration based on weighing the information that we've heard from our public, give them an opportunity this week if they want to write comments or submit them in additional for us to consider, and also for any further clarification. We've heard at least one clarification from staff. There may be other questions that will arise that need to be clarified, that I'd like the opportunity to hear that before I make my final decision.
Would it be,
And we're having discussion. We don't even have a second on the motion.
well, whenever it's appropriate to have discussion.
Yeah. So just to clarify, the motion did include upon signature of the document, correct?
Exactly. And
Okay,
that's
so
what
there
we're
is a
waiting
motion
for.
on the floor. Is there a second to table upon signature of the extension document? Is there a second? Okay. There is no second to that motion.
Okay, then-
Would anybody then consider another motion?
Well, what I want to know is, can we take more time to where, unless this is not even a possibility, it sounds like there were wires mixed as far as the various parties getting together and talking. Can we allow enough time for that
Well, if you wish to make a motion.
legally?
I like 1 week. I don't want a further extension. I think we, the board, I think we need to do our due diligence. We need to make a good decision, but I don't want to make it just on what I've heard, because this is important information we're getting from our community. For me, there's still some questions of clarification from our staff, and I think that's imperative upon us to do our job for our community.
In any event, the motion did not have a second.
Right.
So that takes us back to the issue at hand, which is whether or not we will approve the final land development plan, and specifically the waiver requests. So we need a motion to either approve or deny the plan and the waiver requests.
Why don't we make a motion? Is it appropriate to make a motion to delay more than 1 week?
You can make the motion.
We
if there's a
certainly
second
can
to
do
it.
that, and I don't mind. I would prefer to bring it to closure, especially because we have those variances that have to be considered. And if you're going to, well, either way, if you're going to deny it, you still have those ordinances or the waivers that you have to be able to defend. And so that's why I would like further clarification on that before I would make a motion to go either way, either approval or denial.
Well, let's try this, see if there's any support for this. I would make a motion that we delay, table. Our next meeting is a workshop meeting. Our next business meeting is the week after that.
What's the motion?
The motion would be to delay for 2 weeks.
Would that be acceptable to the developer?
That way, we have what we need, and if there's any desire to work amongst the parties, then we have, at least have a better chance at that than 1 week would allow.
Yes, we'd be willing to do 2 weeks.
Then I make the motion as stated, is that, and then,
You want to table it for 2 weeks, which would be 2 Wednesdays.
Correct.
Right, and it needs to be the 2 weeks with the Wednesday as the date because of meeting on Tuesday. Mr. Fisher, would that be agreeable to you?
Yes.
Again, you're representing your client.
Yes.
Then, Amanda, we need to change the, oh, you didn't put the date.
You didn't put the date down yet?
Okay. I mean, personally, I don't mind waiting 2 weeks, but I would have preferred just to bring it to closure next week. I think for all concerned, it's in our best interest, but I'm certainly willing to yield to 2 weeks.
Well,
so therefore,
Mr. Judd has made a motion.
I'll second the motion.
To delay for 2 weeks upon signature by the developer, and you have made a second. Is there any other board member comments or questions about this?
I would, just to clarify, then that would, the board can do what it's got to do. If the parties and the residents and the parties involved want to talk, they can talk. And otherwise, when the date comes around, we vote.
A comment is, what are we expecting? These more people to come in with more concerns, or bring these people back and repeat what they've already told us? I'm not sure. I mean,
I heard that there was attempts to speak, the residents and the gentleman here, that there were attempts at communication. This simply allows, some attempts, simply allows an opportunity to work some things out, if that's possible.
would it be an idea to have the meeting that never happened happen between the Swan and yourself?
That's up to them. That's up to them.
My question is, what's going to change in that meeting? You've submitted the plan. We know that you have to make a write-in. Your testimony was here tonight. We have all the plans. And what could change if you met with them on your plan?
I honestly don't know. That would be hashed out during the meeting, if any, and what changes would be possible.
Because my main concern is in and out, and I personally don't think that's going to change.
Well, actually, I have a problem with every one of these waivers. And is the plan viable without these waivers?
I believe we can make accommodations without the waivers. We'd be obviously preferred to have the waivers, as I think it makes a nicer overall plan.
Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I'll call for the question on the motion.
And this, just to be clear, this is to, with approval from the developer, to delay for 2 weeks. Maybe we should just do a roll call vote on this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I have a question. I can't understand whether, public comment
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yo, every public meeting of the Board of Supervisors, when there is an item on the agenda, the public has an opportunity. So, yes, absolutely. Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Starting with
Mrs. Lindsay,
No.
Mr. Zumis,
no.
Mr. Judd,
Yes.
Mr. Chrisman,
Yes.
Mr. Henry.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we're back.
Well,
we're back to zero.
that puts us back to ground zero. Would anybody like to make any other motion?
I make a motion that we deny the action on a final land development plan for Colonial Road and Lingelstown Road.
Okay.
That's rather simple.
I don't.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
It has been moved and second that we deny the final land development plan for Colonial and Lingelstown Road. Any additional questions or comments from the board? Okay, then a roll call vote on that, please.
Mrs. Lindsay,
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Zumis,
Aye.
Mr. Judd,
Aye.
Mr. Chrisman,
No.
Mr. Henry.
Aye. Okay, the plan is denied. And I just lost the remaining agenda. So, okay, that then takes us, and I just accidentally turned my agenda off. That now takes us to improvement guarantees, development agreements, and plan reaffirmations. Anybody have, there they are up on the screen. Anybody have any questions or comments relative to the improvement guarantees?
Mr. Gutschall, are there anything unusual? I did not see any. I'm just asking for clarification.
No, Mr. Crispin, there are not. Nope.
And, okay, and Mr. Chairman, I'm going to break this into two motions because of Ms. Lindsay. Mr. Chairman, I'll move the improvement guarantees, beginning with the UPMC, the 4830 Londonderry Road, SWMP, Autumn Oaks, 6405 Flank Drive, 725 Hampton, 1145 Willoughby, Stray Winds Farm. I will move approval for those as presented.
Okay, we have approval of those improvement guarantees. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. What about the Shadebrook Phase 2 extension letter of credit?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the Shadebrook Phase 2 extension as a separate motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Mr. Chairman, I have to recuse myself because of personal issues.
Okay, thank you. So we have 4 ayes and 1 abstention. So that is approved. Payment of bills for Lower Paxton Township and the Lower Paxton Township Authority, Madam Treasurer.
Before I pay the bills, I was thinking tomorrow's Friday. Tomorrow's only Thursday. So the concert will not be tomorrow night. It will be Friday night at 7 o'clock. We are a little confused because it's Wednesday.
Yeah.
On that note, I'd like to pay the bills of Lower Paxton Township and Lower Paxton Township Authority.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any other announcements? The next meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors will be a workshop meeting on Tuesday, August 13th at 7 p.m. right here in this room. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Meeting adjourned.